welcome. My name is Hazumi, and today we are doing ASMR reading Creepypastas for the spooky season. I guess we can just get into it, right? Okay, Hazumi, I need your help with this. This is not copypasta. This is a long read. I recently moved into my dorm, starting as a sophomore in a college, and a friend of mine gave me his old Nintendo 64 to play. I could finally play all of those old games of my youth that I hadn't touched in at least a decade. That weekend, I decided to drive around the neighborhoods, hitting up the local garage sales, hoping to score on some good deals, when one last house caught my attention. I still have no idea why it did. There were no cars there, and only one table was set up with random junk on it, but something sort of drew me there. So I got out of the car, and I was greeted by an old man. His outward appearance was, for lack of a better word, displeasing. I couldn't really pinpoint anything. There was just something about him that put me on edge. Has Ben drowned? Oh. He flashed a crooked smile at me and asked what I was looking for. I immediately noticed that he must be blind in one of his eyes. I forced myself to look at his left eye instead, trying not to offend, and asked him if he had any old video games. He said he had a few ones in an old box. He assured me he'd be back in a jiffy and turned to head back to the garage. I looked up and the old man was suddenly there again, smiling at me, and I laughed nervously as he handed me a Nintendo 64 cartridge. It was the standard gray color, except someone had written Majora on it in black permanent marker. The old man smiled at me and told me I could have it for free, that it used to belong to a kid who was about my age that didn't live here anymore. There was something weird about how the man phrased that, but I didn't really pay attention to it then. I thanked the man, and the man smiled at me and wished me well, saying, "Goodbye then." At least that's what it sounded like to me. All the way in the car ride home, I had a nagging doubt that that man had said something else. My fears were confirmed when I booted up the game. To my surprise, it worked just fine, and there was one save file, named simply Ben. Out of curiosity, I looked at the save file. Eyeballing it, I could tell he was pretty far in the game. He had almost all of the masks. He was on day 3, and by the stone tower temple with hardly an hour left before the moon would crash. I remember thinking it was a shame that he had come so close to beating the game, but he never finished it. I made a new file named Link, out of tradition, and started the game, ready to relive my childhood. For such a shady-looking game cartridge, I was impressed at how smoothly it ran. However, the only thing that was a little unnerving was that at times, the NPCs would call me Ben. I figured it was just a bug, a fluke in the programming causing our files to get mixed up or something. It did kind of creep me out though, and it was around after I'd beaten the Woodfall Temple that I regrettably went into the save file and deleted Ben. I'd intended to preserve the file just out of respect of the game's original owner. It's not like I needed 2 files anyway, hoping that that would solve the problem, and it didn't. Now, NPCs wouldn't call me anything. Where my name should be in the dialogue, there was just a blank space. Frustrated, I put the game down for a day. I started playing the game again last night. Now some of you more hardcore Majora's Mask players know about the 4th day glitch. For those that don't know, you can Google it. I happened to get it right on the first try, and the time counter at the bottom disappeared. However, when I pressed B to exit the telescope, instead of being greeted by the astronomer, I found myself in Majora's boss fight room at the end of the game, staring at Skull Kid hovering over above me. There was no sound, just him floating in the air above me. Immediately my palms began to sweat. This was definitely not normal. I tried moving around the area, and no matter where I went, Skull Kid would always be facing me, looking at me. I thought the game had been bugged or something. I was beginning to doubt that very much. I was about to reach for the reset button when text appeared on my screen. I instantly recognized that text. You get that message when you get the room key from Anju at the Stockpot Inn. But why was it playing here? I refused to entertain the notion that it was almost as if the game was trying to communicate with me. Sure enough, 15 seconds later, another message appeared on the screen. Go to the lair of the temple's boss. Yes or no? And I realized that I couldn't select no. Taking a deep breath, I pressed yes, and the screen faded to white, with the words, "Dawn of a new day," where I was ported, filled me with the most intense sense of dread. The way I felt here was a feeling that I didn't even know existed. It was such a twisted, powerful presence that seemed to wash over me. I appeared in some kind of weird Twilight Zone version of Clocktown. I walked out of the clock tower, as you normally do when you start from day 1, only to find that all of the inhabitants were gone. What replaced them was the ominous feeling that there was something out there, and that it was watching me. Perhaps the most chilling thing was the music. It was the song of healing, but played in reverse. The constant loop began to wear on my mental state. Every now and then, I would hear the faint laugh of the happy mask salesman in the background. I looked in all 4 zones of Clock Tower, only to find nothing. textures were missing. Was Clocktown had me walking on air. The entire area felt broken. Just remember standing in the middle of South Clocktown, realizing that I'd never felt so alone in a video game before. The combination of the out-of-place textures and the atmosphere of the haunting melody of the once peaceful and soothing song being butchered and distorted. But I was literally on the verge of tears, and I had no idea why. I tried leaving Clocktown, but every time I attempted to zone out, it screamed fade to black, and I would just zone into another part of Clocktown. By this point, it was obvious the game didn't want me to leave, but I had no idea why it was keeping me here. I don't know why, but I came up with the idea that maybe if I drowned myself in the laundry pool, I could spawn somewhere else and leave this place. As I zoned in and ran towards the pool, that's when it happened. Link grabbed his head. The screen flashed for a brief moment of the happy mask salesman smiling at me, with Squirrel's Kid's scream playing in the background, and when the screen returned, I was staring at the Link statue from playing the song Elegy of Emptiness. I screamed as the thing just stared at me, that haunting facial expression. I turned around and ran out back into South Clocktown. To my horror, the f***ing statue followed me in the only way I can compare is to like a weeping angel from Doctor Who. It was like the thing was chasing me. I tried to shake the statue, but it would literally appear right behind me every single time. I ended up running into the Swords Master Dojo and ran to the back. I don't know why, but in my panic, I just wanted some kind of assurance that I'm not alone here. I tried attacking the statue with my sword, but to no avail. Confused and backed into a corner, I just stared at the statue waiting for it to kill me. Suddenly the screen flashed again, with the happy mask salesman and Link turning to face my screen, standing upright, mirroring the statue, looking at me along with his copy. Whatever was left of the fourth wall was completely shattered, while I ran out of the dojo terrified. Suddenly the game warped me into an underground tunnel, and the reverse song of healing queued up again before the statue appeared behind me again, this time aggressively. I could only take a few steps back before it would summon behind me. I hurriedly made my way out of the tunnel and appeared in the southern Clocktown. As I ran aimlessly, in sheer panic, a sudden re-dead screamed, and the screen faded to black as dawn of a new day appeared again. The screen faded in, and I was standing on the top of the clock tower, with Skull Kid hovering over me again, silent. In some sort of desperate attempt, I equipped my bow and fired off a shot at Skull Kid, and it actually hit him. And he played an animation of him reeling back, and on the third arrow, a text box appeared saying, "That won't do any good," and I was picked up off the ground, levitated upwards on my back, then Link screamed as he burst into flames, instantly killing him. I jumped when this happened. I had never seen this move used by anyone in the game. The Skull Kid laughed, and the screen faded to black, only to have me reappear in the same place. I decided to charge him. The same thing happened. This time, during the death scene, the faint sounds of the reverse song of healing would be heard. On my third and final try, I noticed that there was no music playing at this time, that all there was eerie silence. I remembered that in the original encounter with Skull Kid, you were supposed to use the ocarina to either travel back in time or summon the giants. I attempted to play the Song of Time, but before I could hit the last note, Link's body once again horrifically exploded into flames, and he died. As the death screen neared its end, it began to chug, as if the cartridge was trying to process a lot of something. When the screen came to, it was the same scene as the first 3 times, except Link was lying on the ground, dead in a position I had never seen in the game before. I couldn't move. I couldn't press any buttons. All I could do was just stare at Link's dead body. After around 30 seconds of this, the game simply fades out with the message, "You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you?" before kicking you out to the title screen and starting again. There was one more save file added, entitled Ben. Ben's save file, right back where it was before I deleted it, at the stone temple, with the moon almost crashing. That was really long. Okay, I've never heard this in my life. I've also never played Majora's Mask before. Ooh, this one's a good one. The Russian sleep experiment. Russian researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 people awake 15 days using an experimental gas-based stimulant. They were kept in a sealed environment to carefully monitor their oxygen intake so that the gas didn't kill them, since it was toxic in high concentrations. They only had microphones and 5-inch thick glass porthole-sized windows into the chamber to monitor them. The chamber was stocked with books and cots to sleep on, but no bedding, as well as running water, a toilet, and enough dried food to last all 5 over a month. Everything was fine for the first 5 days. The subjects hardly complained, having been promised falsely that they would be freed if they submitted to the test and did not sleep for 30 days. After 5 days, they started to complain about the circumstances and events that led them to where they were. They started to demonstrate severe paranoia. They stopped talking to each other and began alternately whispering into the microphone and one-way mirrored portholes. At first, the researchers suspected that this was an effect of the gas itself. After 9 days, the first of them started screaming. He ran the length of the chamber repeatedly, yelling at the top of his lungs for 3 hours straight. He continued attempting to scream, but was only able to produce occasional squeaks. The researchers postulated that he had physically torn his vocal cords. The most surprising thing about this behavior is how the other captives reacted to it, or rather, didn't react to it. They continued whispering into the microphones until the second of the captives started to scream. The two non-screaming captives took the books apart, smeared page after page with their own feces, and pasted them calmly over the glass portholes. The screaming promptly stopped. So did the whispering into the microphones. After 3 more days passed, the oxygen consumption in the chamber indicated that all 5 would still be alive. In fact, it was the amount of oxygen 5 people would consume at a very heavy level of strenuous exercise. On the morning of the 14th day, they used the intercom, hoping to provoke any response from the people they were afraid were either dead or vegetables. They announced, "We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor, or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you immediate freedom." To their surprise, they heard a calm voice respond in a single phrase: "We no longer want to be freed." Unable to provoke any more response using the intercom, it was finally decided to open the chamber at midnight on the 15th day. The chamber was flushed with the simulant gas and filled with fresh air. 3 different voices began begging, as if pleading for the life of loved ones, to turn the gas back on. The chamber was opened, and the soldiers were sent in to retrieve the test subjects. They began to scream louder than ever, and so did the soldiers when they saw what was inside. 4 of the 5 subjects were still alive, although no one could rightly call the state of any of them in life. The food rations past day 5 had not been so much as touched. There were chunks of meat from the dead test subjects' thighs and chest stuffed into the drain in the center of the chamber, blocking it and allowing 4 inches of water to accumulate on the floor. Precisely how much of the water on the floor was actually blood was never determined. All 4 surviving test subjects also had large portions of muscle and skin torn away from their bodies. The destruction of flesh and exposed bone on their fingertips indicated that the wounds were inflicted by hand, not with teeth. The abdominal organs below the rib cage of all 4 test subjects had been removed. Jesus, that is so scary. The skin and most of the muscles attached to the ribs have been ripped off, exposing the lungs through the rib cage. All the blood vessels and organs remained intact, but had been taken out and laid on the floor. The digestive tract of all 4 could be seen to be working. It quickly became apparent that what they were digesting was their own flesh that they had ripped off and eaten over the course of days. Most of the soldiers were Russian, special operatives at the facility, but still, many refused to return to the chamber to remove the test subjects. The subjects themselves continued to scream to be left in the chamber and demanded that the gas be turned on, lest they fall asleep. To everyone's surprise, the test subjects put up a fierce fight in the process of being removed from the chambers. One of the Russian soldiers died from having his throat ripped out, and another was gravely injured by having his testicles ripped off. In the struggle, one of the 4 living subjects had his spleen ruptured and bled out almost immediately. The medical researchers attempted to sedate him, but this proved impossible. He was injected with more than 10 times the human dose of a morphine derivative and still fought like a cornered animal, breaking the ribs and arms of one doctor. His heart was seen to beat for a full 2 minutes after he bled out. He continued to scream and to flail for another 3 minutes, struggling to attack anyone in reach and just repeating the word "more" over and over until he finally fell silent. The surviving 3 test subjects were heavily restrained and moved to a medical facility. The 2 with intact vocal cords continuously begging for gas, demanding to be kept awake. I know that there's like some deeper meaning for this one, but I'm not really sure what it is. It's so spooky though. I like it. Alright, this one is a bit shorter. Excited. Okay, let's go. It's locked. About 10 years ago, I was recently divorced and living alone in a 1-bedroom apartment. The place was clean, and rent was decent. One of those places had a doorman. I felt safe here. I was alone and loving it, focused on my career and not my clingy ex-husband. Things were finally looking up for me. At the time, I was working pretty late at the office and would often stumble into my apartment sleep-deprived in the early hours of the morning and awake by 6:30, 7-ish to start the day. I started noticing that in the morning, my door would be unlocked sometimes. I usually dismissed this as my sleep-dead brain, thinking that the bed looked more appealing than locking the door. Another thing that I noticed since moving in was that I seemed to misplace things more than I used to. I wasn't really that big of a deal, just enough to be a slight annoyance in my day. The longer I lived here, the more frequently I seemed to forget to lock the door. It seemed like almost a daily occurrence. More things went missing, things like pictures, shaving razors, and most disturbingly, my underwear. This went on for long enough that I started to get a little paranoid. I started to take the time at night to make sure the door was locked. I got into the habit of every night after I locked the door to turn the handle 3 times and say to myself, "It's locked, it's locked, it's locked." Time after time, I would wake up and the door would be unlocked. One time, I even tried staying up all night to watch the door, but I ended up falling asleep in my chair. So I invested in a video camera. So one night, I set up the camera facing the door. I hid the camera under a pile of towels on the floor. I locked the door and went to bed. When I woke up, my apartment looked normal. Nothing missing that I could see. I decided to check the tape. I fast-forwarded through hours of footage, not seeing anything. I was just about to give up when I noticed the handle of the door jitter, then slowly crept open. A figure slid through the half-open door and walked towards the camera. It paused, looked around as if it was listening for something, then walked forward into direct view of the camera. I paused the camera. The hairs on my arm and back of my neck started to rise. I was staring directly into the face of the maintenance man of the building. I played the tape a little more. He looked comfortable as he walked around the apartment. Then he turned and walked towards my bedroom and out of the view of the camera. I didn't know what to do. Sobbing, I called the police. I tried to explain over the phone, but I couldn't. 2 officers arrived at my doorstep. I told them everything and showed them the tape. I remember seeing the blood drain from their face. They promised me that I was safe and they were going to get this guy. I needed to lay down, but didn't want to be alone. One of the officers offered to stand outside my apartment door. As I was lying in bed, unable to sleep, but too drained to move, something kept nagging at me. My mind was racing. Then a realization slowly washed over me and chilled me to the bone. We watched the tape and saw the man entered my home, but we never saw him leave. Oh my god. I froze, then started shaking. I needed to get to the front door. I swung my legs over the side of the bed cautiously. My feet hit the cold wood floor, and I felt a warm breath on my ankles. I raced out of my apartment as fast as I could into the safety of the police officer. He called for backup. They found the man under my bed, clutching a knife and a Polaroid camera. To this day, I cannot sleep alone. Oh my god, that was actually like really scary. I think when it's like events like this that could actually happen in real life, that's when things get very spooky. Someone submitted a My Little Pony fan fiction. You know, next time I should just collect emails for Google Forms so that people can't be f***ing stupid. Surely you read it now. Okay, let's go. The Lavender Town Syndrome was a peak in suicides and illnesses of children between 7 and 12. In Japan, back in February 27, 1996, the phenomenon occurred shortly after the release of the first Pokemon games, Pokemon Red and Green. Rumors say that these suicides and illnesses only occurred after children playing the game reached Lavender Town. The location's theme music had extremely high frequencies that studies have shown only children and young teens can hear, because their ears are more sensitive. Due to this effect, at least 200 children supposedly committed suicide, and many developed conditions and afflictions. The children who killed themselves usually did so by hanging or jumping from heights. Those who did not often acted irrationally and complained of severe headaches after listening to the theme. This mass hysteria was caused by the first released version of the game. After the incidents, the programmers fixed the location's music to be at a lower frequency. Lavender Town now sounds differently depending on which Pokemon you are playing. Since that change, children are no longer affected by the song. One video appeared in 2010 using special software to analyze the audio waves of Lavender Town's music. When played, the software created images of the unknown near the end of the audio. This created controversy, since the unknown didn't appear in the series until the Generation 2 games, Silver, Gold, and Crystal. The arrangement of the unknown appears to translate to "leave now." Dang, that's crazy. Do you think that that's real? I can't remember if this is not real or not. Oh, it's not? Man, that would have been fun. That would have been a good story. Well, no, because people died. So it probably wouldn't be a good story. Thank you guys so much again for being here. Okay, I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye, everyone.